There's a question from, there are two questions which are, I think these are for Annapurni and for Saket, from Meenakshi Sundaram Murli. The first is, most of our night sky is now polluted. What initiatives can be taken to bring astro excitement to school kids today? And another question to Saket. Where is it one? Yeah. We should do more for introduction of puzzles earlier at school levels, hackathons, etc., to proliferate and celebrate solving puzzles. What new initiatives could be taken according to you? So these are both questions about what can be done at school level.
Yeah, so coming about looking at the sky and able to see stars. So it's important step, and for us, we do preserve the night sky, the observatories, but as a step in an official way, we have been able to do it in Hanle, where 23-kilometer radius around Indian Astronomical Observatory is notified by the Union Territory Ladakh as the first dark sky reserve of the country. Is yet to be officially inaugurated, but we are making sure that it's important to work with the local community as well to implement it. It's not like somebody has to stand there and implement it. It is difficult because you're doing a lot of commercial activity things and all that, so you can't go there and impose it. But I think the most important thing is to have a place around every city where you can actually control the light and where one can go there and enjoy the night sky. So if that is made available, then the natural, wonder will kind of be completely out if we don't do it.
Like in that regard, at least IMSC is really doing lots of outreach activities where we do share our excitements with the schools around us and at every level, like school, undergraduate, graduate, teachers, everything. So we have a very vibrant outreach program where we do try to encourage not only puzzle solving kind of activity, but many of the mathematical activities that can kindle some interest in young kids. So yeah, I agree that we should do more of it, but I think we have made a great start already at IMSC.
This is a question for Ramakrishnan. This is from S. Vishakha. What could be some safe and sustainable alternatives to everyday plastic items around us?
Everyday plastics don't need being changed. For instance, your buckets are all okay with what you're using. What you need to change really is what you're using and discarding, which is called the single-use plastic, right? So I think there are two solutions to it. One is to address it from the point of view of taking it for granted that it's going to be discarded, and so what will happen to it, right? That is being attempted, but it's going to be a little more expensive solution because the one that is currently used is incredibly inexpensive. So doing anything to replace it with a sustainable material is going to be hard. But so I think the solution should be to try and educate people to reduce usage of that kind of single-use plastic. And if they have to use it in a responsible way. There's no other solution to it.
So there's another question for you from Shivani Nandiwal. It's a bit of a strange question. How much is population responsible for the plastic pollution? If we decrease the population, do you think it will reduce the plastic pollution? What are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. If you decrease the population, it will decrease all our problems, including the amount of plastic that you generate. So I was just teasingly thinking about myself that one of the most important discoveries in chemistry of the last century, which is basically making ammonia from nitrogen, the Haber's process, has allowed us to grow this big 8 billion people, certainly cannot have survived in our globe without that important discovery. So I guess, you can blame him for the population, even though it was such an important discovery. Yeah.
This is a question for Shankar from Dave Thomas. How well have we mapped our ocean floors? Is it true that the surface of Mars can be better mapped than the ocean floors?
I can't comment on Mars. I think I will pass that to her. But ocean floors have been mapped using gravity data. If you talk of in situ mapping, that's not possible. I mean, you go back to that MH370 case. It's a very simple case of tracking that we knew where it would land up. It would happen. You look around Reunion, you should find it after some time. But from where has it come? You still don't know, because that's a huge area, and there's no way to find that. So if you're talking of anything other than satellite measurements, it's not viable. So you will get a coarse sample if you are looking at any other method. And how do you validate the satellite measurement? That's a tricky question. You're also sitting on an unstable surface. You have a tide and you have other motions. This is not a problem for the deep ocean. If you're talking of 2 kilometers depth, then that accuracy is good enough. You're talking of an error of maybe 20 centimeters. But if you come closer to the coast and you're talking of 10 meters and a 1 meter tide, now your error is 10%. Now that's not easy to solve. So it's the mapping near the coast that's a problem.
And another question also for you from Mithran TG. Can you explain the currents in the Bermuda Triangle? Is there really some problem around there, or are these just rumors around missing planes?
I don't think there is anything specific about those currents. They are similar to what you see out here. It's just that you have a lot of sargassum out there. There's a sea called the Sargasso Sea. And I have no idea what else happens out there. The huge amount of seaweed floating out there. But people like looking for mysteries. The number of disappearances is not very great. You can try building a story around MS-370. After some time, people may do it.
Let me get to another question for Annapurni. This is from Karthik. The JWST is giving an unbelievable amount of information. Images it gives are breathtaking. An image taken by it had galaxies which were almost fully developed just a few million years after the Big Bang. But after that initial news, there was not any further information about it. So why is this so?
Actually, the public release of these spectacular images they did initially, but then they do come once in a while when there is a spectacular thing like planets were released. But a huge amount of data is released for research purposes. If you go and look at the research articles and discoveries which are coming out from JWST, which was minimal in the beginning, is actually soared quite high. So if one is looking for the spectacular images, it will take, this is basically press releases and, the public gallery images which are which they produced as cornerstones. But the research papers are really coming out now.
So it is ongoing. It is not.
Yeah, no. A lot of actually.
It's not an information blackout by.
No. It is not like on the public space or the social media with this spectacular pictures. Probably they will take some time to do it. But then the other thing which I want to say is that the data policy for this particular mission is there that most of the data is out immediately. So anybody can do research, and also proposal cycles are going on, and people are, including a lot of Indian researchers, are doing fantastic work with the data.
There's a question which has come in on SMS, somebody with phone number ending in 5736, Ramakrishnan. If the problem with enzymes not having access to the amorphous zones of the plastics, that seems to be the problem, can we not reduce the size of the plastics and make it some kind of a substrate?
I didn't follow the question. Can you just read it once again?
So I'm just reading it out verbatim. The problem with enzymes not having access to the amorphous zones of the plastics, can we not reduce the size of the plastics and somehow make it a substrate with better access?
Okay. So but let me try and answer the question as I understand it. The percentage of crystalline and amorphous volumes, relative volume fractions, can be changed by the way you process the plastic. Okay, so that is because crystallization has a sort of time-dependent behavior. So you can, if you cool it very fast, you can reduce the crystallite sizes. If you cool it slowly, you can increase the crystallite sizes and so on. So, but it will impact the mechanical properties. So I think the point is you want to have a balance between good mechanical properties and degradability. Sometimes they don't go in the same direction. So you have a conflict situation where you want good mechanical properties, you want higher crystallinity, you reduce access to enzymes. So the thing is to try and get stuff that are amorphous, which can be accessed, but at the same time have the properties of the semi-crystalline systems. It's challenging.
This is a question for Saket. Can you comment on the mathematics or the algorithms behind solving Rubik's cubes?
Oh, that is quite complex, and it requires good amount of group theory.
So whoever asked that question, this was a question which came SMS ending 5850. You can catch catch him afterwards and
Yes.
have a one-on-one talk with
Right.
him. I think that will be a good idea. Two more questions about the oceans. Rahul asks, as there is a long-term effect of anything that happens in the sea, can we ever exactly say about the actual reason of any natural disaster which is caused by the sea?
No, natural disasters are of various kinds. If you are talking of tsunamis, they are quick. For example, you have just 2 hours from the time an earthquake occurs of Sumatra to it affecting the Indian coast. So that's from start to finish. To evacuation, you have just 2 hours. So you have to make your forecast within 15 minutes and get the entire government machinery going. That's one kind of disaster. Then you have rogue waves, which were considered to be a figment of sailors' imaginations. These are huge waves of several meters in height that can completely wreck ships. And they were accepted by oceanographers only after one of them had been observed by a team that was not sailors. It was dismissed as old wives' tales until then. These are solitons. In case of solitons, it's very difficult to track them. With altimeters, you could try, but then you don't have the kind of number of snapshots that you need. In the case of other disasters, it's a question of what exactly are you talking of. You're talking of hurricanes, there are many causes. It's a coupled system, the atmosphere and the ocean. So if you pin down the kind of disaster you're talking of, it's probably easier to look at whether it's possible to find the cause or not.
One more ocean-related question which has come in on SMS. You said that the ocean wave accords with the wind often. Do fishes also move along with the wind?
The fish are embedded in the ocean. So they would go with the currents at least in the larval stage. So the place where they spawn is not the place where you finally find them. And it's not easy to pin down where the fish spawn. For example, sardines are found off Kerala. That's the dominant region. But where they spawn is still not very clear. The Bombay duck, for example, land up of Gujarat once they're mature. Where do they spawn? So these are tricky questions that are not well understood yet. But that is related to the circulation because the circulation will move things. The fish can swim against currents, but it requires energy. So why would you expend energy in doing that unless there is some return for it?
One question for Saket. Raman asks, quantifying a puzzle, not quantify, I think he means qualifying a puzzle as good or bad. It depends on the number of variables in the puzzle. So some comments on that.
What I meant at least is that amount of time you may need to complete it. But that indeed depends on how many variables the puzzles has. But sometimes those variables are easy to understand and easy to recognize. Sometimes these variables are much more complex and it takes much more time to disintegrate them. So it depends, but you are right in the sense that it does depend on number of variables the puzzles has.
There's one more question which is also, I think, about plastics. Anantika is asking, if the cell is semi-permeable, then how can microplastics even enter?
Well, cells are made up of assembly of molecules. They are not a membrane. I'm not sure if the same person asked me at tea, but they are not a membrane. They are actually an assembly of lipid molecules that are, have ability to reorganize, reconfigure. So endocytosis is a process by which it reorganizes and envelopes something that's outside the cell, and it can bring it back into the cell. So many of the stuff that gets into the cell come often by endocytosis, which means the cell membrane simply reorganizes around a species that is outside and internalizes it. Yeah. So it basically makes a capsule around something that's outside and internalizes the capsule.
A question from Sagarika, this is for Shankar. Could you please explain how would these ocean currents look like if the Earth were a 2D flat disk rotating around an axis?
Well, the linear stuff that I talked about is solved on a linear flat system. So the remote forcing example I showed from MacReady's thesis is a flat Earth. So you just open it out and you solve it. So that's what it looks like. It's pretty realistic. It's just that there are effects of sphericity and rotation that you have to account for when you are opening it up. But if you don't open it up, you can't solve most of the problems with paper and pen. So no progress would have been made.
So I think we have more or less come to the end of our question. There is one very open-ended question which is to all of you and to all also many of us here who are scientists. Satish asks, at age 40, if I want to study undergraduate physics now, are there options in India? I mean, everybody can answer. I would say that like studying never stops. It's a lifelong process. So, anybody has any more comments to this? Can. Otherwise, I invite all of you to join me in thanking our speakers. This brings us to the end of this year's edition.